Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Fair Life on Monday. And yes, hey, hello everyone. Hey, Kat. Yes, you made it on time. Just. It was close. It was close. And Jan and Damaris and Drew. Hey, great to see you all. Yeah, it is another Monday night, and really, yeah, happy about that. The week has flown by for me. I don't know if it's flown by for you. What has been going on in y'all's life? For me, I've a lot of what I've been doing is just contacting fairs and going through a bunch of planning for the next year, but also going through a lot of old stuff and cleaning out a bunch of stuff. I told you I was working on the old computer and uh, putting in the new computer and getting everything reset up here, and it involved just taking everything down and just cleaning out everything. So it's been interesting. It's been interesting. So and hey Nancy, thanks for joining us. Yes, I it has been an interesting week. I hope it has for you too. If you have a chance, please go ahead and share the stream. I appreciate it as always because it does help the channel, and anything to promote is always a good thing. Everybody knows that if you're performing at Fair. So little trivia there. Yeah, I had a couple of interesting things just kind of pop onto my stream and my list the other over the last few weeks, and one of them was kind of interesting. I hope you think so because this well, it's essentially a story about a couple of academics who are doing some research, and uh, yeah, I'd like to definitely talk about that a little bit. Oh, and Kat, it's been a rough week. Uh, yeah, I know it has been. It's been a rough week for Alacia. I know that she's been having some problems uh, with her uh, with her knee, so that's been rough. And yeah, if it's not one thing, it's another. So she still is not going to join us tonight, I don't think, for going in the feed for Life's Affair. So it's just me again. Never easy. But yeah, a couple of academics, what they were doing was, well, okay, they were studying the skull of a woman who was buried about 1,000 years ago at a woman's monastery in Dalheim, Germany. And two ladies, Anita Rodini was initially interested in the starch granules in tartar and studying that and using it as a proxy for diet. Now, I mean, now of course we brush our teeth and get rid of all of that stuff at least as much as we can. Back then they did not. So the tartar is still there on the teeth. So what she does is she puts it in a mild acid and finds out what's in there, and from that starch can identify what food they ate. Kind of novel. Christina Werner went along with her, and she wanted to study the DNA of ancient oral bacteria. So together they were working on that, and they discovered something kind of interesting. So it just was interesting to me, so I wanted to share it. Uh, I guess just go ahead and show you a little bit of what they were looking at. The skull, and it's yeah, quite interesting. I what they found was a really brilliant blue was there in the tartar. I mean, so brilliant it seemed. Where could that have come from? It was unnatural. They very out of place for 1,000 years ago in dental tartar. So she started asking around and trying to find out what that could possibly be. And of course, she went to physicists, and they were saying, "Why are you asking me about art? That's not my specialty." And she was asking art historians, and they were saying, "Why are you asking me about plaque? I don't really understand what you're doing." But she finally got with a physicist at the University of York who helped confirm that the blue was indeed from the mineral lazurite, and it's derived from lapis lazuli. And you can see a little bit about that. It's brilliant blue, uh, ultramarine specifically. And she'd later learned that the pigment, that if you're going 1,000 years ago, it could only have come from a single region in Afghanistan. So pretty cool, right? I, I, yeah, yeah, it definitely gets rid of, and very neat, I think. And I mean, the ramifications were kind of interesting because they were trying to figure out where it could have come from. And really, the main thing that was used for back then was for the pigment blue, ultramarine, in art. And it was very expensive at that time. I mean, uh, it was the most expensive color at that point. The second being gold. So that puts it into perspective of how rare and expensive this was. It was usually reserved for special high value paintings. But having it in a woman's teeth from medieval times threw people for a bit of a loop. So they started asking around, and originally art historians were very skeptical. They were thinking, oh, she must have been a cleaning lady, so she just happened to clean that up and it got on her teeth. Once again, a standard situation of going with the popular concept that women really didn't contribute much in medieval times, which is a shame. Uh, and that's one of the reasons I love this article. And yes, Jan's asking about it. It was in the Atlantic, if you're curious, as far as what publication. But yeah, yes, one of the problems with that is artists back then were normally, I mean, a lot of stuff wasn't signed, and that was mostly men. Um, but when it came to manuscripts and writing that, believe it or not, there were a good number of women who did that too. Back then, art wasn't really considered um, a gift. It was considered a skill, and as a skill, anybody you can learn it. And the concept was the better quality your equipment was, the better the ink, the better the pigment, better the brush, the better the canvas, the better the art would be. That was the that was the rationale back then. It's kind of an interesting concept for us now to think about that, but that's how people viewed it. Uh, and yes, women played a huge, I mean, part of that. There were very notable women scribes who did manuscripts, just like that classic view of monks doing it. But let's see. Here's a good picture of the mineral itself, lazurite, mined from Afghanistan. This is from that too, and yeah, it is ground down, and it takes a lot of time to get it ground to that fine of a powder, which is why art historians knew that how finely ground the blue was in her teeth, it could have only been for an art uh, use. So yeah, really interesting, really interesting. Now, most of the time, I mean, people, when you think about that ultramarine blue color, uh, historically, it's mainly been reserved for angels in art, or most popularly the Virgin Mary, her cloak, or robes. That's here's, I think I have an example of that here. Yeah, here we go. That blue that is very popular and used from back then. This is from Renaissance times, but still very popular. So yes, that's a little bit of history about that. Nothing against Umberto Eco and the classic view of monks doing all the manuscripts, but yes, there were a lot of groups of women who did very high value work back then, and their contribution is largely, unfortunately, forgotten. But hopefully that'll change a little bit, because yes, that's why I like to talk about things like this. Uh, yes. Now, the monastery that this woman was buried at, back in medieval times, it fell to a fire. It was burned down. Happened a lot back then, very common. So there's actually little evidence of what life was like at that particular location. But there is, from people who've studied it, there is evidence that in that region of Germany, there were places as close as 40 miles away where women did very high quality manuscript work. So that was kind of a region for it. And now, thanks to this, we kind of know that maybe at that place, that was considered a very, very high quality uh, manuscript production site. But this does bring up a really interesting possibility for archaeology. I mean, and that's kind of another thing that grabbed me about this, because from the tartar in people's teeth and the skeleton's teeth, I mean, imagine being able to identify metal workers or carpenters or other skilled artisans just from the particles embedded in their tartar. I mean, it really opens up some possibilities. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I hope you did too. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that, or uh, anything interesting that comes to mind with you? I know Nancy's talking about a book series. Oh, a forensic archaeologist. Oh, yes, yes. And bones reveal information about how they lived. It is kind of like that. It is kind of like that. So, yes, very much so. So, anyway, I thought this was kind of interesting. I wanted to share a little tidbit about lapis lazuli and that pigment. And yeah, little trivia. Never hurts. Never hurts. Well, anyway, I'm actually doing pretty good on time for a change. I'm not getting much in the way of comments. Are they coming through? I think so. Well, if you, I'll go ahead and jump over to, or maybe you're spending time doing a lot of writing and typing out. That's possible too. I noticed that, oh, here we go. Now people are typing in. Right, right, Katsurita. That actually was mentioned in the article as a factor that nowadays, since we do that, the we don't really care. We don't think about archaeologists in our day-to-day lives. We don't, we don't plan ahead like that. We're just not conscientious like people, I suppose. Yes, and you're right. That is very true. And unfortunate. And unfortunate. But, hey, when you think about the future, let them deal with their own stuff. We've got our own issues to deal with. So not a very bad route. Let's go ahead and jump onto the Faire map here. Oh, right. Very true. Now the Faire map, it's changed a little bit since last week, but not a whole lot. We're going to start seeing some shifts as we get later in May. Some of the spring fairs are ending, and you get some fairs that are dedicated primarily to May, and then you're going to start to see summer fairs start up in late May, early June, and July. But we're kind of in that last hurrah of the spring, and there aren't as many fairs in the summer because of the heat, so we'll see how that turns out. But for now, let's jump in and take a look. Oh, and Gwendolyn, don't worry, it's okay. We all have it's been that kind of a week, so I'll give you some leeway on that. Oh, and Cassie has some stuff to say about, yeah, a lecture series on alchemy. Yes, yes, and a lot of that works with how they managed to get these colors and use them for art. A lot of testing went in to figure out how to do that. So yeah, it is very interesting indeed. But anyway, let's see. Let's go ahead and start with Texas, where I am, and you can see that we have the Scarborough Renaissance Festival in Waxahachie, just south of Dallas. And then over in Oklahoma, just north of that, we have the Oklahoma Renaissance Festival in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Going to the east in Georgia, the Georgia Renaissance Festival in Fairburn, Georgia, is still going on. And jumping up to Tennessee, we have the Tennessee Renaissance Festival in Arrington, Tennessee. And the Tennessee Pirate Fest is still going on in Harriman, Tennessee. So something to check out. Going over to New Jersey, we have the New Jersey Renaissance Fair is starting up in Bordentown, New Jersey. So something to check out. I have a lot of friends going to there performing, so that's fun. And in Maryland, we have the Fantasy Wood Festival, kind of a fairy festival in West Friendship, Maryland. Then over in New York, we still have the Kingdom Fair going on in Yorktown Heights, New York. And in Connecticut, Robin Hood's Fair in Harwinton, Connecticut is still going on. So that takes care of the Northeast. And then going over to the North, we have the Iowa Renaissance Festival going on at Amana. I'm probably pronouncing that right. Probably Amana Colonies, Iowa. And then in South Dakota, you don't hear about many fairs in South Dakota. Let's just be honest. I don't blame them, but it's just an observation. The Black Hills Renaissance Festival in Lead, South Dakota. Going over to Utah, we still have the Utah Renaissance Festival and Fantasy Fair in Marriott, Slaterville, Utah. And the Woodland Fairy Festival at Gardner Village in West Jordan, Utah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I see your point. I see your point, Jeremy. Yeah, pirates in landlocked states, just brigands. You're not wrong. But I mean, there were some pirates that did go inland. I mean, let's uh, not that far inland, but some of them did make the trek inland and sack cities in the Caribbean back in the day. So I'm looking at you, Panama. Yeah, that's the back then. So something to maybe, but let's just say it's more of a stretch, and they've got to work for it more. Going over to California, we have the Kronberg Renaissance Festival in Corona, California. And then the Shasta Renaissance and Fantasy Fair in Anderson, California. So that finishes it out. And hello, Jessica. Great to see you. And yes, Jan is making the comment that aren't those just river pirates? I guess that might be true. That might be true. But yes, we do have a lot of fairs going on, so that is really exciting stuff. Yeah. It's like I said, it's probably going to end relatively soon. End of May. Usually Labor Day weekend is the last hurrah for the spring fairs, and Labor Day. Memorial Day weekend. I'm awake. Memorial Day weekend is the last hurrah for spring fairs, and it starts to after that. That's usually last weekend, and then it gets a little. Okay. Oh, interesting. That's an interesting tidbit, Jessica. I'll keep that in mind. From the watch page instead of the web page, you will see all the comments. Huh. Okay, I did not know that myself. Lake Pirates got nowhere to run. Well, let's just say Lake Pirates are very good at not giving up and not surrendering because they don't have a choice. Okay. Interesting. Oh, there's only two of us in there. That's funny. Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump over to 7 reasons. Now, 7 reasons. I tried to think of something a little different this week, and I went with something kind of based on what my story was about and why being an artist in the Renaissance was awesome. Oh my gosh. Really? We're going with that movie quote? Okay. That's fair. That's fair, Damaris. That's fair. Okay, so 7 reasons being an artist in the Renaissance was awesome. Great for the midlife crisis. I mean, there were merchants, a sort of a middle class kind of group that had money, and there was that whole concept of I want to be remembered. I want to have some level of immortality. So hiring a painter to paint your portrait, that was the that was usually the way to go. So yeah, a lot of opportunities there, a lot of opportunities for work, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah, they're really cool, right? Really cool. So it was great for the midlife crisis because those really large sports cars weren't available back then. So people had to do something with it. Always good. Number two, there were so many names you know. I mean, you think about famous old artists that people on the street know, and who are they going to say? Maybe Da Vinci or Michelangelo or people like that. And who are they? Okay, yes, they're also the Ninja Turtles, but it's not just that. I mean, yeah, they're all four turtles, but they're Renaissance artists, and that's usually who people know. They kind of got that level of fame that surpasses history a bit, and so it's a good opportunity to get famous if you know the right way and you're good at it. All right, number five, secular versus religious. I mean, it was a moment when secular art, non-religious art, I mean, you could do it. You could easily do it. And I mean, there was a lot of money to be had by doing religious art for the church or families that wanted that. But there were a lot of other opportunities too. And you could do non-religious art and not get excommunicated for it. Always a good thing. Always a bonus right there. So number four. Number four. Vanishing point perspective. I know some of you artists out there know exactly what I'm talking about, but this was a time when art changed a bit. It did. You go from medieval times when art was it was like paper dolls just pasted on top of each other, and there wasn't as much depth. Not really at all. But vanishing point perspective that was when that started to become a thing. Late medieval times, early Renaissance, and all of a sudden paintings started to look more like photographs, as opposed to looking like more akin to old hieroglyphics. I mean, it was very, very 2D. It had more of a perspective aspect that really, really brought art, made it more real to people. And I think it was a great time for that. So for you artists who are watching, you know what I'm talking about. Pretty cool, right? Number I knew Damaris would like that one. I knew she's an artist, so I knew she would like that. Number three. Artist workshops. Yes, artist workshops. It wasn't just about an artist doing painting. It was like a corporation. You had the artist and lots of other people in charge of things, people under them. I mean, when you did work, you didn't just do a painting. You did a group of paintings, a group of things. You had people help you, people doing some of the grunt work for the art. I mean, it was very much an industry, very much like that. It was, think about it like an assembly line type of approach before assembly lines, where people did the different parts to help put it together. And you had the main artist was kind of the designer of everything, but other people kind of put it together under him. It was a great opportunity for apprentices to learn the craft and the trade. And yeah, there was a lot of work opportunities there. So kind of interesting. Yeah, printing press. Yes, good example. Good example. All right, number two. Number two. Yeah, we're kind of getting here. It was before non-compete. See, the thing was, artists raised the status of cities, especially in Italy, but other places too. It was very known to, if you had a great artist who had a great reputation and you were building all of these wondrous monuments and paintings and everything, it really raised the status of your city. It was a thing to be proud of, but also tourists, pilgrims. I mean, there were it helped with your industry. So poaching artists from other cities was a big deal, was a huge thing. They Other cities would try to sway an artist and say, "Hey, we'll give you all of this." I mean, this was a time when money was the money was there. I mean, artists were paid a lot of money if they were popular. So they were like they were the rock stars, the sports heroes of their time. They were huge, and some of them were poached to other cities, and it was in a city's interest to try to keep an artist happy and keep him there, because a lot of them, if they weren't happy, there was a lot of opportunity. So well before non-complete peak clauses in contracts. Let's just say that. The number one reason why being an artist in the Renaissance was pretty awesome. Medici pays best. Generally, yes, that's true. But, uh, there's always elements of, I mean, there's always the A players, the A artists, but then you get those levels below where, you know, you can only throw so much money around. Even the Medicis. Number one, craftsperson to artist. I mentioned earlier when I was talking about how artists were viewed back in medieval times, that it was considered a skill. It wasn't really considered an art form. And as the late medieval period kind of came and went and early Renaissance came about, that view changed to artists had their own unique view. They were like, in a way, philosophers, visual philosophers, because they could convey ideas, both obvious and veiled, in their artwork. And they really started to, or at least they started to be known for it. And people started to appreciate it. I know, right? You'd love to be poachable. Right. Hey, buy me off, please. It's always nice to have options. That's what I always say. But no, I mean, that transition to being just a person with a skill, like a carpenter or or a blacksmith or whatever, and being considered somebody whose opinion matters, who is their opinion sways the masses, and that became a very valuable commodity. So that whole concept of what their time was worth changed dramatically over that period of a few hundred years. And so the Renaissance time, much more lucrative to be an artist, especially if you have a reputation. And as we all know today, especially I know as a musician and performer, and some of you do too, being the best at something doesn't mean you're going to be the most famous. There's talent is about 10% of the equation of fame and a good career. There's so much more to it. So yes, it is a deal. Oh, right. I like that. A goldsmith to an architect. Yeah, that's a good example. Definitely. Man. Yes. Now, that does to say that men did, tend to have more of a monopoly on that a bit. But, there are, as always, exceptions. And I look forward to talking about those more in the future. Because, I love that either forgotten history, overlooked history, or, let's be honest, buried because of men's egos history. Yes. So, yeah, definitely going to try to look more into that. And I hope my story earlier helped a little bit with that. Change a few opinions, at least. Always nice. Always nice to look at history with a fresh new lens, as I like to say. But all right. Well, thanks, everybody, for joining me. And I made it right on time. This actually worked out pretty well. I was trying to see if I could make it exactly at 7:30 and be done. And here I am. Not bad. I'll take it. It's a process. It's a process. You're not wrong. I just love history. It's it's interesting. For me, I love history. So all the elements of history, some of them fairly controversial, I'm interested in that too because it's part of history. Movies, I mean, people who know me well know I love movies and I'm a huge movie buff. But it's not that I love a particular type of movie. I just love movies. So all of these different genres I know a lot about. Um, it's that kind of thing. Yes, yes. It was very common for when you paint to kind of put it in your mouth, put the brush in your mouth like that. Uh, that was a very common thing back then. Now, some of you who know a lot about history may think that, well, it could have been because people were kissing the book. Um, when very religious books or paintings were sometimes when they were on display for people, they would treat them with reverence by actually kissing them. So there was the thought of, well, maybe this is how this lady got that in her teeth. But no, no, that wasn't a trend until much later. Yeah, that was more of a late medieval type of thing. They didn't do that back then. So yes, yes, and thank you. I appreciate that, Susanna. Yeah, that was. I really enjoy it myself. Just if I notice anything interesting, I try to share because uh, those little tidbits I find interesting. Right, right, and that's kind of what you do. That was a very common thing back then. Oh my gosh. I guess other than Heroes in a Half Shell, maybe. Other than that, I don't know if I do. Oh, really? Okay, good for you. Um, yeah, history. I think part of the problem is there's a lot of how history is conveyed that is boring, and that's the problem. They wash it down to dates, filter it down to general concepts, and they make it less personal, less relatable. Um, it reads more like, I hate to even say an encyclopedia because sometimes it's more like an almanac. It's even less than that. It's so little, and yeah, it's frustrating. It always has been for me when I look at a um, yeah when I think about history and how I've seen it teached before or teach taught. Wow, boom! It's a Monday. I'm not awake. Uh, how I've seen it taught before. I remember once in history class, the teacher was talking about, what was she talking about? She was talking about, oh right, the Articles of Confederation in the U.S. and how all the different states um, related to each other, how that worked. And I raised my hand and said, "What? How was that? A bit like ancient Greek city states, or was it different than that?" And I saw her, and it looked like she was about to cry because I made an observation that was out of box thinking, and I realized I realized at that point that wasn't common, and that's a sad thing. Oh, quills. That too. Yeah, I mean you can do that, but it's brushes, quills. I mean there's a lot of different things used, but yeah, you can you can do them either way. It's possible. Right, right. Yeah, that was for those that don't know that history. That is a very sad history. Um, yeah, our parents tended to talk about that a lot as a very common thing, but I think around our generation and younger, that it's kind of a little bit of forgotten history, unfortunately. Yes, teaching is very crucial. Uranium makes an awesome yellow. Yes, I guess suppose it does. I don't know if it would it would be a good long-term investment. Oh, right. Right, 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 right. Yeah, old movies, I love movies. They tend to not do well with history. There are exceptions, but look at movies as fiction. Um, I always looked at movies as not so good with history, but good with society. Movies often tend to show what people were thinking or what people wish they were thinking. And I've always found that interesting. And I agree with that completely. Connecting it to uh, current day activities is always more interesting. Right. That's always good. Well, I suppose that is all I have for today. And went a little over 7:30, but I'll take it. It was fun talking with y'all, checking in and seeing how y'all are doing. But yeah, it I'm going to be getting a lot more done this coming up week, and I should have a lot more to talk about. But as always, it's fun to spend Monday evening with you, and I hope you have a great week coming up. And remember, I know that it's warm out there, but and sometimes that can be oppressive and not seem fair, but always remember that on Monday evenings, you always have a fair life. So take care, and I'll see you soon.